Hello and welcome. Thank you so much, Sandy, for joining us today. I would love to know more about you and about your experience and what you do. In the beginning, could you please let us know more about yourself and what you do and your amazing journey?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for inviting me today. So, Mishko Paganon Quain Adishnakas Mangdodem. I'm Red Thunderbolt Woman of the Loon Clan, a proud member of Seine River First Nation in Northern Ontario, which is Treaty 3 territory. And I work in the confusing, awkward, misunderstood arena of Canadian reconciliation. So what I describe my work as feather dancing, and that's definitely from my Indigenous perspective. If you think of a beautiful eagle feather, which is sacred to us, one of our most sacred items, I always describe it as one side of the feather is the Indigenous peoples living and trying to survive inside Canadian borders. There's a lot of healing, a lot of empowerment that needs to be done on that side, but equally important is the non-Indigenous side of the feather, where there's so much education that's lacking, so much misunderstanding, and a lot of education has to happen. So I tend to dance between the two worlds. Whoever needs my help today, I might be working with the First Nation community and helping them overcome some challenge. Or lately, with the September 30th First National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, I now work with a lot of international corporations that have offices here in Canada, and they're wondering, like, what in the world happened when we heard about Kamloops and the first discovery of the children, followed by the next and the next. The world took notice. Canada took notice. I think to a large extent, the Canadian identity was shaken to its core, and people want answers. And I've always said, I don't care, scares me. I can work with I don't know. I can have a conversation. I can share information. If you've never worked with Indigenous people, how would you know this information? It wasn't shared in our public education system. So I help fill that gap, attempting to lead a country in a proper direction. So just a little task that I try to tackle every single day. So that's kind of what I do. I do that in many different forms. Whether it's, well, I used to do live events that's just starting again, thanks to COVID and restrictions, a lot of online events. I have 4 different books out helping people to understand the Indigenous perspective. I do a blog post every single day and a lot of podcasts and interviews and conversations. And every single one of them just fills me with so much hope. I'm very conscious of the fact that everything I do, my mom couldn't have. And that's just one generation ago. So yes, we have a lot more work to do, but a lot has happened. And I think we need to hang on to that to be able to sustain the rough days.
Wow, that's so powerful and amazing. Wow, like the power of earth, like, wow, like the writing, the podcast. Like, I think we need this and we need more, like more books and more education. And what you said is so right about, like, when we educate ourselves and people around us, we will be able to communicate better. So, how did all of this start? Like, what was the beginning?
Oh, wow. I have had such a journey to get here. And none of what I do now, it was not like this was some grand vision that I was going to do one day. That's not how this played out at all. Although I do recognize that I've always been a writer. I was the one that had the diaries with the lock on it when I was like 7 and 8 years old. And then of course that became a journal when I was older and too old for diaries. But writing has always been how I made sense of my world, especially because as an Indigenous young woman, the world didn't make sense to me. And that was largely because I had a beautiful Anishinaabe, an Ojibwe woman for a mom, and my dad was French. And in our home, there was total respect. My dad didn't want my mom to change. He loved how she viewed the world, and it was so different than his upbringing. And she loved how much he supported and encouraged her. But looking back, I believe I was like 6, 7 years old the first time I noticed that the world treated them differently. Dad could walk into a store alone and it was like, "Hi, Leo, how are you doing today?" And if my mom walked in and she was a little bit too far away from my dad, she'd often get that, that horrible, "What are you doing here?" face. And it confused me because I knew my mom, and I knew my mom was this amazing woman, and what's wrong with this person and why are they treating her this way? So I truly believe I was born to do this work, seeing the differences play out in my hometown right from a young age and realizing it was wrong. And I think that's always been my saving grace, that I learned really quickly that another person's opinion of you can be inaccurate, that they can judge you as not having value or not having anything to contribute. And that could be dead wrong. And I think that's a powerful lesson for anyone to learn. So I had this ideal childhood, it was filled with love and support. We didn't have a ton of money, didn't even notice. It was just everything we needed, we had, but that love and support made up the difference. But when I was 17, my dad passed away. And if anyone had knew me back then, you probably would have thought I was a very confident person, but I wasn't. I didn't believe in me. I believed in my dad. My dad said I could walk on water, so I believed I could walk on water. My dad said I could be prime minister one day, so okay, fine, I can be prime minister one day. And I hope you know what I mean by this, but when I used to do live events, we always have that projector, the kind that shoots the image up on the wall so everyone can see it. So now I describe my dad as my first projector, that I didn't have a self-image yet. I was just living the image that he projected, but the light went out. I lost my dad.
Yeah.
So I made a fatal error that way too many people, women especially Indigenous women, I went searching for another projector. I didn't know yet that I could be my own projector. I could decide what that image is. And when you go looking for someone to give you value, when you give another human being that much power over you and your self-image and your self-esteem, that attracts all the wrong kind of people. And that's what happened. So I'm a 10-year domestic abuse survivor. It was what I now call the dark years. And I came out of that with 2 children to feed and like zero self-confidence. So I did what many parents do, single parents do. I went and got a job. I need a job. I have 2 children to feed. But as puzzle pieces came together, I ended up working for an Indigenous agency. And it was an employment and training agency. So that meant we help people find a new job or go back to school or start their own business. And they would walk into our doors feeling like very challenged, or they didn't know what they were going to do. Their future was very uncertain. And with our help, everything changed. And I really liked this. I liked that we helped people turn their lives around. But I've always been ambitious, and I started as a secretary. And almost from day one, I really liked the looks of that corner office. And I thought, wouldn't that be awesome to be that woman? And it was a woman executive director. Like, I want to be her. Like, I want to be running this. Long story short, it took 20 years. I had to go back to school 3 different times. It took bidding for and moving up the corporate ladder many, many times. But after 20 years, I ended up the executive director of a $4 million nonprofit company in downtown Toronto. So I did it.
Wow.
And I will never forget the day that my mom called and asked, like, executive director, isn't that what you wanted to be? That title you kept saying? And it's like, yeah, mom. And she's like, you did it? And it's like, yeah, mom, I did. And I was in that position when I lost my mom. So my mom didn't survive heart surgery. And the strongest woman I ever met, who was joking around with the nurses and being her usual awesome self, was suddenly gone. And like it happens for so many people, that was so eye-opening for me, because I thought, if someone as strong as my mom isn't even guaranteed tomorrow, then what am I waiting for? Like there's no guarantee I get tomorrow either. If I want to do stuff, like, it has to be now. And I had that attitude. And at the same time, my mom had all these amazing teachings and stories that were so incredibly empowering. And I used to bring my girlfriends to her kitchen table so that she had an ability to get people to believe in themselves, not to believe in her, but to believe in themselves. And I didn't want those stories to die with her. And I was actually terrified they would. So I grabbed a pen and I sat down and I wrote my first book. And it's a daily motivational guide. There's a little story every single day, stories about my life, but mom's teachings are woven into them. And I look back now and it's so crazy. I had a goal. If I could help 4 people, if 4 people read my book and were actually believed in themselves more because they read it, it was worth the 18 months it took me to write this book. And I had no idea how to publish a book. I had no idea how to write. I just started writing. My daughter introduced me to Facebook in the middle of this process, and create pages didn't even exist then. It was just groups. And she created a group for me with the title of my first book and encouraged me to start sharing a little bit, because she said, Mums, your book's great, but it's on your computer. What are you going to do? Invite them in your home to read it? Like, we got to figure out a way to get it out there. I started sharing in that group. People started joining and inviting their friends. And one day, one of the new people that had joined reached out, and she was a publisher who wanted to publish my book.
What was the name of this book?
The first book is called Honorary Indian, because that's what I'm making the reader. I'm going to pretend you're Indigenous and I'm going to share these teachings with you. What I didn't realize is that first book is also a huge journey of grieving and healing. And that's why it resonates with so many people, because it's honest, it's raw in some cases, but it's as real as it gets. Now that's 4 books. Like, I've got 4 books out, countless seminars, and 12 years later, I've worked with everything from women in domestic shelters to domestic violence shelters to youth in communities to non-Indigenous Canadians who want to understand. And I refuse to crucify anyone for what they don't know, but I believe there's a responsibility to learn. So that's how I got here.
Amazing. That's so powerful and inspiring. So from the first book, how did you continue on writing, and what was the next publishings?
Well, and like I've always said it, I've said it a billion times, it would be easier for me to give up breathing than it would be writing, because it is how I make sense of my world. So Honorary Indian came out, I designed my first seminar and went to work. I quit my very well-paying job because I wasn't guaranteed tomorrow. And if I was ever going to do this, I needed to do it now. Built a website, launching myself as a motivational speaker, and hit the ground running. But I kept writing. And what I realized fairly quickly after the book came out was that my mom didn't fit in one book. There were so many other stories and teachings I hadn't shared. There was only 365 entries. She had more wisdom than that. So the second book is called Her Mother's Daughter. and it continues the story. It's the rest of those stories. And to me, the most powerful thing about that book, not only the teachings and the stories, but it's the title. Because when I was growing up, my mom would literally say to me, don't tell people about me, because she knew I was fairer than my brothers. And she would say, tell them you're your father's daughter. Tell them you're French. She was trying to protect me because she knew how dangerous this place could be for Indigenous young girls. And I refused. It was like, why would I not want to tell them about you? You're amazing and powerful. And of course, I didn't understand what she was trying to tell me. So that's why the title, it's like, no, I'm my mother's daughter and I will never hide that. So that's number 2. Then I was actually living in Toronto when the whole conversation on reconciliation started happening in Canada. And honestly, in the beginning, at least to me, it seemed like it was a whole bunch of politicians, non-Indigenous men in really expensive suits, talking about what needed to be done for reconciliation. I honestly wanted to climb up on the roof in downtown Toronto and scream out, you're asking the wrong people. You don't get to decide what we need to reconcile. We're the injured party here. That's not how reconciliation works. But nowhere was I hearing the Indigenous perspective. And there was no action plan. I kept running into people that wanted to be part of the change, but had no idea what to do. And I was waiting, like, come on, you guys love strategic plans, come up with one. And no one was coming up with one. So I wrote my 3rd book, and it's called The Path. And it is the action plan. And when you read that book, you actually find out there's 2 paths represented, one for non-Indigenous Canadians and one for Indigenous people. And if nothing else, once you read the book, you realize why we haven't reconciled yet, because there's a ton of work on both sides that needs to be done before that can happen. That one kind of took off like gangbusters right from the get-go. It's a very easy read. I've had people read it in one day, but the same people read it 10 times. It becomes a resource manual that they keep going back to. And there's an accompanying seminar I designed to go with that, and easily my most popular seminar, which again gives me so much hope. And then my last book is called I Am Awake. And it literally just launched this summer. I did it all. Thank you. I did it all. Whereas before I had my publisher and the printers that did all that work, because of COVID and so many businesses decimated, I pulled everything back and decided to do it all locally here in my region. So I know the person that designed the cover, and I know the person that printed it and mastered the inside. It's all incredibly personal. I put way more time and effort into editing and really fine-tuning this book. And I didn't realize it till I started like looking over the final product. It's Honorary Indian meets The Path. It's the total culmination of all of my work. It's the pride of an Indigenous woman and the need for reconciliation. And I went back to that daily, like something to consider every single day. And I just love that book so much. It's like I put everything I had into that last book. And I think it destroys some stereotypes. The front cover is a very affluent picture of a fancy latte and a MacBook Pro in the background. And I thought that in itself, a lot of the work I do is destroying stereotypes. People meet me and it's like, okay, not what I thought of an Indigenous woman at all. And it's like, good. We need to expand those definitions. And that book definitely does that. So, ta-da!
Wow. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to start reading them. Amazing.
I'm really, yeah. And I love the connectiveness of it, because I can hear one day from an Indigenous woman who identified with every single page, including how hard it is to be an Indigenous female activist in this country and how challenging that can be at times. So they totally resonate. But then I hear from non-Indigenous colleagues and clients, and they're just like, wow, I needed that perspective because I didn't understand. And I really stay away from shame and guilt. I have no interest in invoking those feelings, but I'm going to give you information and a view that you probably don't have and help you understand how I see things. So
Amazing. Wow. Are you planning to write something, like, are you thinking about something to write next? And do you have, like, when you started going more into, like you said that you're helping even non-Indigenous communities. Did this get you, like, you started to see, for example, especially that you have a rich background, like culturally, so you started to see, oh, like the teachings I had could be different or similar to the teachings other my colleagues or my friends have. For example, the community is suffering from common or different. Like, are we sharing or non? Or so different on different perspectives, like, I mean, as a whole Canadian
yeah,
society.
I find, just based on my experience in the groups I've worked with, that I resonate and identify so much with other marginalized groups. The commonalities are ridiculous. Whereas with mainstream Western based Canadian society, it's almost black and white, which I don't see as a negative. So my mom used to do this thing, and I use it in seminar all the time, where she would make me and my brother stand back to back. And she would get me to look around the room and acknowledge that there was so much I could see. But there was one part of the room I couldn't see, and that was directly in front of my brother. And that my brother could see so much of the room, but the part he was blind to was obvious to me. And she reminded us never to forget that just because we can see something clearly doesn't mean that it's not in the blind spot of the person we're talking to. And if they don't realize it's in their blind spot, they're not going to realize it's even in the room. And I see that play out so often when we're talking about racism. For example, if someone identifies a store owner or a sales clerk as being incredibly racist, and the white people in that area saying, well, they never treat me that way. It's like, duh. Of course not. Look in the mirror, right? You look like that store owner, but that is not the perspective of someone with darker skin. So I help people understand their blind spots. And again, not from an accusatory way, but I'm just going to share my story and what happened to me when I walked into this store. And I'll let you figure out what you want to do with that. So I come at it from a very personal standpoint. I use conversational English. I have no interest in what my mom would call $15 words. I'm not here to impress anyone with my education or knowledge. I'm here to have a conversation. My mom used to point out, keeping in mind in Canada, education was used as a divider for Indigenous families. The children were taken away to residential schools, education. And now we see so many young people highly educated to the point where they can't even talk to their grandparents because of those $15 words. So my mom used to always tell me, no matter how educated you get, you do not have the right to make someone feel stupid because of the words you use. That if you use those $15 words, the only one you're talking to is yourself, and that's ego. That's not conversation. So I used to have academics that I say with total attitude would hear me talking and get that, and it's like, really, seriously? Okay, I'm just going to keep talking because I know they're going to come around when they hear the power of my personal stories. One of my taglines is that I speak to hearts, not minds. I don't need your academic thinking. I need you to realize the pain that was inflicted, because we can all identify with the pain of having a child lost. And when we go to that place, we can actually meet in the middle of the bridge. Right?
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh. Um, well, I'm sorry, and I'm so proud, like to talk to a strong person like you. Actually, this gets us to another phase, like while you were discovering how strong you are, and many people and many women, especially let's say like indigenous and marginalized people, women,
Mhm.
with women from let's say kind of dominant, backgrounds, when there is a power for someone over some other one,
Yep.
and we all share on this kind of foundation or composition and relationships. How would those people realize, because sometimes you're always waiting till, oh, something better would happen, or maybe I should be
Yeah.
patient, or you always give yourself these excuses while you need to move.
Yeah.
How would you say this from your experience?
Well, there's a couple of things I can respond to that. First off, I can hear my mom talking loud as you ask that question. A couple of the things she used to remind me was that creator, which is the way we refer to the higher power, didn't put us here to fail. He didn't put us here to suffer. He didn't put us here to be in pain. And if any of that is happening, that's an environmental thing that we can change. We deserve happy, safety, peaceful existence. So for one, my mom would say, if you're in a situation where you're hurting, you're in pain, then you need to look at your decisions. And do you need to make different decisions now? Change that. So that's one, which really ties into the second one, which my mom would remind me that no one's going to come save me, that if my life is going to change, it's up to me. And trust me, I wasted way too many years waiting for that dude on the white horse that was supposed to show up and save me. I don't know where he took a wrong turn, but that definitely did not happen, which of course I thank Creator for every single day, because I have never met one strong or wise person that had an easy journey. It's like building muscles in the gym. It's a struggle. And being strong doesn't feel like you're strong. Being strong is getting up on that day after you lost the job or your relationship ended and you have no idea how you're going to go on, but you got up anyways. Even if all you managed to do was pour that coffee today, you got up. You're on your way. Be kind to yourself. The other thing my mom used to always say is teach other people how to treat you. They've never met you before. They have no idea how. If you want them to respect you, it's not about respecting them. It's about respecting yourself so that they see how you do it. You want them to be kind to you, be kind to you. Show them how. You want them to respect your boundaries, respect your boundaries. Say no, don't allow them to walk over them, because no, they will not treat you better than you treat you. And I meet so many people that sacrifice themselves and they put everyone else, they kill themselves to be there for their partners and their families, and they put themselves last, and then they're surprised when everyone else does. And it's like, honey, you taught them that. Change the lesson, change what you're teaching them. So the other thing that comes to mind is one of the things that I teach in seminar is that for any marginalized, oppressed group, and by the way, women in general are an oppressed group, so many people resonate with this message. There's three natural human reactions to long-term oppression. And if you think of any oppressed group in your mind, you're going to recognize these. The first one is violence. If you keep telling me I have no value and I'm never going to amount to anything, at some point I'm lashing out, whether it's in words or physical or whatever. I'm going to say, you can't speak to me that way. And unfortunately, what happens is when the people lash out, they rarely lash out at the oppressor. They lash out at the most convenient person, which is their partner, their children, or a community member. And look at our marginalized communities. They're being torn apart by violence. That is the frustration of oppression trying to express itself. And we need to talk to our youth and talk to our men and women and get them to channel that. They can't deny that they're frustrated, but let's do it in a more productive way, right? Let's do the protests. Let's make the signs. Let's do a letter writing campaign. Let's shoot a video, whatever the case may be. So violence is the first one. And a lot of people really don't like that option, but it's actually the second one that scares the daylights out of me. And that's acquiescence. That's the complete and total giving up. That is our youth who aren't bothering to go to school because it's not going to change anything anyways. It is the person, why not drown in alcohol or drugs? It's not like anyone's ever going to respect me. And you hear those kind of words, and they're identifying that they're at that stage. And that's the one that scares me, because when someone's fighting, there's still a flame inside. They're still fighting to deny all of this oppression. Acquiescence, that flame's about to go out if we don't reach those people. And the third option is the one I encourage everyone to take part in. It's nonviolent resistance. It's finding a way to resist the oppression, whether it's leaving a relationship, whether it's quitting a job because someone's disrespecting you, whether it's just saying ouch because they said something racist. And that's a great way to turn the attention back on the person and what they said. It almost instantly, they're like, what? Ouch. Right? So, and it, even for the people in the room, it brings attention to the comment, not to you and your emotional reaction to it. There's so many different ways we can resist. And for me, it's just literally, as a 10-year domestic abuse survivor, at one point in my life, I was surrounded by everyone in my life disrespected me and looked down on me, except for my children. Now, no one in my life is like that, because that's the boundaries I've set. I've taught people how to treat me. And if someone sneaks in and wants to disrespect me, they don't stay around long. That is just not something I speak to. Even online, I just did that blog post this week that caused so much of a reaction. I shared how traditionally Indigenous people would have sat around a fire and you would have listened to the elder, and you don't debate with the elder. You listen, you consider it, you take what you need, you leave the rest. And that for me, when I post a blog post, I'm inviting you to my fire. Come read my words, take what you need. You don't get to debate it. You don't get to suggest I use different words, because this is my fire and this is a safe space. And I won't allow anything to be posted on there that might hurt someone if they came across it accidentally and read it. Instead, I just trying to teach people from my perspective, what I see, the way we look at the world and communicate. And it doesn't have to be adversarial. Once you read the blog post, you have complete and total power to disregard the whole thing. Like, I'm not forcing you to believe what I said, but consider it for a few moments. And maybe it can actually even add to your journey. The last thing I think I would add, and this came straight from my elders, in the book, The Path, the word path, P-A-T-H, is actually an acronym. And I call them the 4 sacred tools, or the essential tools. And as long as we can remember to use these tools, whatever situation you're in, I truly believe it can help. So the P is patience. As my elder always says, we're not fixing this by Tuesday, Sandi. Which means it's okay to take a break, and it's okay that that person doesn't get it yet. It doesn't mean we have to give up on them. Just be patient, give them time. We're trying to undo 7 generations of residential schools. Take some time. The A is for awareness, getting better at being aware of what's going on in the lives of people that don't look like us. What are their fears? What are their challenges? What's going on for that family right next door? Just becoming way more aware, not just of our view in the room, but the entire room, trying to fill that blind spot. The T is for tenacity. Don't give up. Do not give up. I don't believe I have the luxury of giving up because I have grandchildren and I'm working to create a world that I'm not scared to leave them. But I might give up for today. If it gets really super challenging, I might give up for the weekend, but I'll see you on Monday morning, right? Tenacity. Yeah. And the last one is H, is always with humility. Come at it as a student, not a teacher. Realize we learn from every conversation, every situation, and every day. And if we stay in our humility, then instead of saying, why don't you just do this? We ask things like, I don't understand. Why wouldn't this work? There's a total difference, a huge difference between the phrasing of those two questions. The first one burns bridges, ego burns bridges, but humility builds them.
Wow.
So patience, awareness, tenacity, humility.
Wow, I was going to ask you about the teachings or the philosophy, but here we go. Actually, so this connects me actually to the question, like this answers the question, but also how did the generations, like the mothers, especially I think most of the grandmothers generations is like the generation that really suffered directly from these schools. Most of the stories I've heard, people who couldn't speak the language or they were speaking it secretly, they were like traumatized because of the not communication, like the treatment they were receiving. How, even like despite all of this, how did this generation could pass some or most of, like, even the like words in the language, philosophies, teachings, like how, yeah, those are the educators, and were there like secret schools, secret language gatherings?
Well, and keeping in mind, in our way of doing things, school is not a brick and mortar building. School education begins the second you take your first breath to the time you take your last one. It's a continuous journey.
And
And we have to be careful.
In-person communication, right? Like,
Right.
is it like individual or also to a group?
Well, and the thing is, we have to keep in mind for every single nation, it's a different situation. So the nations, for example, that are more remote, the languages are still strong because there just wasn't such an oppressive influence, right? And keep in mind, the last school closed in 1996. So I know people, I lived 7 miles away from a residential school. There were girls and boys my age going to those schools. So people tend to think it's 100 years ago. It's like, no, it's actually really super current. So the language, we have language speakers now. Many of our nations are really focused on reclaiming the language. In Treaty 3, my area, which is more right along the Manitoba border, is where it sits. They have full conferences now in Ojibwe. Just because they really want to reinforce the importance of the language. And it's not just speaking a language. The language is tied to our worldview. For example, the way it was explained to me, in English, you would talk about a river. In Ojibwe, there's a word for a river that the water's flowing towards you, and a totally different word for a river with the water flowing away from you, because that was relevant to our survival. Just knowing it's a river doesn't matter. It's, you need to know which way that current's going, so that if you get in, is this going to be an easy journey for you or a rough journey because you're fighting the current, right? We tend to have one word more verb based than noun based. So it's a very descriptive language. We can have one word that would take 20 English words to describe. right? And just like the word that always comes to mind for me is Debwewin, which the direct translation would be truth, right? Your truth. But when we talk about Debwewin, it's that truth that's in your bones, that base belief that there is no doubt that this is like that value, your value that's hidden way inside. And even if other people don't see it, you know it's there, even if you're not yet brave enough to share that. I can remember spending an evening in a shelter for abused women with my children when that was my life, and distinctly thinking to myself, I'm not meant to be here. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And just, it was almost like a little, I had my mom sitting on my shoulder going, make different decisions, hun. I just, even though I had no self-confidence at that time, somewhere deep inside, it was like, no, this is not meant to be. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. That's Debwewin, right?
Wow.
So look how long it took me in English to describe what I could say in one word in Ojibwe. So that's why the languages are so important. The ceremonies were hidden. They became ceremonies in the middle of the bush, kept and carried by, kept very, very sacred. And there's still ceremonies that people don't talk about, that it's only for the people that practice them. If there's one thing I would really love to move Canada away from, there's all these people interested in, learning about our culture and learning about our beadwork and why we dance at powwow. And it's like, that's not the stuff you need to understand. You need to get to know us as people. We go to grocery stores. We hang out in coffee shops. Like, we have to start seeing Indigenous people as humans that have great qualities and not so great qualities, and that's okay to be flawed and to be healing and to try to figure things out, that we're not a subject to be studied anymore. We're a group of people that need to be included. So
don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our social media platforms. For more information, check out our website.